Growing up, my church was a small white brick building, squeezed between modest homes and a dry goods store on a busy main road. Across the street sat an elementary school, its playground always silent during our Sunday services. The church's name was proudly displayed on the front, though it was our overflowing parking lot, not the skyward pointing cross, that drew the most attention. Every Sunday morning, cars spilled onto the main road, accompanied by the frustrated honks of drivers trying to navigate through our faithful congregation. I can still picture those wooden pews, gleaming with years of polish and weekly use. They lined up perfectly on either side of our narrow center aisle that led to the altar. The walls were sparse, just a few framed Bible verses and that faded picture of Jesus whose eyes seemed to follow me no matter where I sat. The heat is what I remember most. We had no air conditioning, and during those sweltering southern summers, we'd throw open every window. But the breeze that drifted in was as warm as a prayer, offering little relief. I'd feel my dress stick into the wooden pew, sweat trickling down my back as our preacher's voice rose and fell, perfectly in time with the tambourines and chorus of amens. Our congregation was alive with energy. The music was its own kind of witness, tambourines jingling, drums thumping, and our old piano creating a rhythm that seemed to pulse through the very walls of our sanctuary. Every summer we had a revival before school started. Those were an experience all their own. I can still hear our preacher's raw voice with conviction, see the sweat on his brow as he pounded the pulpit. His sermons painted such vivid pictures of hellfire and redemption that you could almost feel the heat of both. Those altar calls were the most intense part of every night. They'd stretch on and on as the Spirit moved through our congregation. People would rush forward, some falling to their knees, others raising their hands high, faces streaked with tears. The church mothers would hover nearby, always prepared with pieces of fabric to cover our legs if our dresses rode up too high, and tissues for our tears. I can still feel their hands on my shoulders, hear their whispered prayers as they paced like guardians, making sure each person's conviction was genuine and not just for show. I remember one night distinctly, I'd fallen asleep on my knees at the altar, exhausted from the performance, when one of the church mothers firmly told me to return to my seat. That's what we did back then. Knelt at that altar, begging for forgiveness, pleading for salvation. The pressure weighed on us like the summer heat. We couldn't just sit quietly like churches do now. No, we had to show we were touched by the Spirit. Every summer, I had to get saved again. When I say had to, I mean exactly that. Get saved or face hell. Maybe on the drive home from church, or walking to school tomorrow, or sitting in class or during lunch. Or, well, you fill in the blanks. Each revival meant another round of salvation, complete with tears, slobbering, and convincing displays of remorse for being such a terrible sinner. Honestly, I didn't understand why we had to go to the altar all the time. As I got older, I learned to play the part. I mastered the art of forcing tears, pleading with Jesus, earning those approving pats on the back, meaning I'd pleased the elders and remain at the altar in a teary-eyed state for a respectable amount of time. Too long, and they'd get antsy since the altar call was at the end of a long service. Too short, and they'd doubt my sincerity. It was a delicate balance, a performance I had mastered. Looking back now, it's almost funny watching us kids with our perfectly timed sniffles and exaggerated expressions of sorrow, all to pass their repentance test. I learned early that faith wasn't about what lived in your heart. It was about what others could see. You had to prove to everyone watching that you were truly sorry, truly repentant, or risk not just hell, but their judgment too. Truth be told, I didn't mind getting saved to escape hell, but the rest, this relationship with Jesus, everyone talked about. I had no clue what that meant or how to make it real. I don't think anyone else did either. That was my introduction to Jesus and God's kingdom. Salvation meant one thing: escape from hellfire and judgment. Who in their right mind would choose eternal flames? Certainly not me, the attention-seeking middle child with an overactive imagination and a loose relationship with truth. Getting saved wasn't a choice, it was survival. Being a pastor's kid meant extra scrutiny. The congregation watched our every move. We attended every service, missed countless school events, and yes, sang in the choir because they needed bodies more than talent. But what really got to me was this twisted concept of salvation. Why did I need saving over and over? Why did I have to prove my remorse to the adults? Since when did tears equal repentance? Why was I begging Jesus to save me when, according to our Easter programs, he already had? Another thing, I used to wonder why God needed our fundraising. Every Saturday, Mama and the church women would spend hours cooking and selling dinners to help keep our church running. Then we'd be right back there Sunday morning for Sunday school, followed by the main service. Some Sundays included YPE, Young People's Endeavors, if enough teenagers showed up. Then back again for night service. Monday brought prayer meeting or band practice. Wednesday was midweek service. Thursday meant choir rehearsal. Friday nights belonged to youth service. The irony wasn't lost on me. We spent almost every day of the week in church, sitting through endless services that left us drained, yet still had to fried chicken dinners to help keep the lights on. Since God was in control, why didn't he handle the mortgage without our help? But what did I know? The weight of it all started crushing me. I began questioning whether I'd ever truly been saved or if I was just going through the motions. If salvation could slip away so easily, had I ever been good enough to begin with? The constant need to prove my repentance left me feeling like a perpetual failure, always one step away from hellfire despite my best efforts. Guilt became my constant companion. Every negative thought, every tiny mistake felt like another mark against my soul. I carried the unspoken label of hypocrite simply because I wanted to laugh, have fun, and not look like I'd been baptized in vinegar. The God of my childhood was a wrathful deity who demanded perfection and punished anything less. He felt distant, intimidating, impossible to satisfy. I saw him as my judge rather than my father, and I spent every moment trying to earn his approval, or at least dodge his anger. I lived in constant fear, not of his love, but of his punishment. This version of God turned faith into a burden instead of a blessing. It was all about rules and fear, never about relationship or love. To ask questions meant questioning God, which was fine with me since he held the answers. The adults would quickly silence me or my siblings if we dared question anything about how the church operated. Now, I understand how deeply this upbringing affected me in ways both good and bad. Yes, it taught me about faith, but it also left deep wounds. It took years to shed the fear and shame that had been planted so deep in my heart. Still, I've learned to value the journey. It's led me to a more genuine faith, one built on love instead of fear, grace instead of guilt. Sometimes I wish I could go back and tell my younger self that God isn't some cruel dictator waiting to punish every mistake, that he's actually a loving father who wants to walk alongside us, guide us, help us grow. I'd tell her that real faith brings freedom, not fear. And to anyone else who grew up with this twisted view of God, I want to say it's okay to question everything. It's okay to doubt. It's okay to find your own path. True faith isn't about meeting others' expectations. It's about finding your way to Jesus who loves you exactly as you are. But back then, this was all I knew, until college came along and I decided I was done with church, done with God, done with Jesus. Or so I thought.